He was the father of Hong Kong's most famous commercial director. But Wong Tin-Lam was a titan in his own right, a quiet patriarch whose influence shaped decades of film and television. His story isn't one of overnight success, but of relentless struggle against poverty and personal hardship. He was the master craftsman who directed classics, the savvy producer who built a television empire, and the revered mentor to future legends. This is the story of the man who did it all to put food on the table. To see how his legacy was forged, keep watching and subscribe for more untold stories from film history. Before he was a legend, before the Hong Kong film industry bowed to his influence, and long before his son Wong Jing would become a box office king in his own right, Wong Tin-Lam was just a young man trying to survive. Born in the bustling, cosmopolitan metropolis of Shanghai in 1927, his early life was soon upended by the tides of history. As conflict loomed, his family made the pivotal decision to move to Hong Kong, a city that would become the canvas for his life's work. This new home was a place of frantic energy and opportunity, a British colony teeming with refugees and ambition, where fortunes could be made and lost with dizzying speed. It was in this dynamic environment that Wong Tin-Lam found his calling, not in a classroom or an office, but in the flickering, magical world of cinema. He entered the film industry in the late 1940s, not as a prodigy, but as a grunt. He started at the very bottom, learning the craft from the ground up, in a way that few modern directors ever could. He worked as a film processor, a log keeper, and an assistant to anyone who needed one. The studios of that era were not glamorous places. They were factories, churning out entertainment for a hungry public at a relentless pace. The work was grueling, the hours were long, and the pay was meager. But for a young man with a family to think about, it was a living. More importantly, it was an education. Every task, no matter how menial, taught him another piece of the complex puzzle of filmmaking. He learned about lighting by hauling lamps, about sound by managing cables, and about story by watching directors wrestle with scripts on chaotic sets. This hands-on, often thankless apprenticeship forged in him a pragmatism and a deep, practical understanding of the medium that would define his entire career. By the 1950s, his hard work and innate talent could no longer be ignored. He earned his chance to direct, and he seized it. He quickly became a go-to filmmaker for major studios, most notably the powerful motion picture and general investment company, which was later known as the Cathay Organization. In the factory-like system of the Hong Kong film world, versatility was the key to survival, and Wong proved to be a master of all trades. He was a cinematic chameleon, effortlessly moving between genres. One month, he might be directing a sweeping wuxia film, full of sword-wielding heroes and elaborate martial arts choreography. The next, he would be at the helm of a lighthearted comedy or a tear-jerking melodrama that left audiences reaching for their handkerchiefs. His creative peak during this period was arguably the 1960 musical masterpiece, The Wild, Wild Rose. The film was a sensation, a stylish and emotionally charged drama that became a landmark of Hong Kong cinema and cemented his reputation as a top-tier director. He was no longer just a hired hand. He was an artist, a hitmaker who could deliver both commercial success and critical acclaim. He was a respected figure, a man who had climbed the ladder from the very bottom rung to the director's chair, earning his place through sheer grit and talent. But behind this story of professional success lay a constant, grinding struggle. The glamour of the director's chair did little to alleviate the immense financial pressure that was a constant feature of his life. His motivation was never the pursuit of some lofty artistic ideal. It was something far more fundamental. As he would later admit, his entire career was driven by the simple, desperate need to put food on the table. He had a family to support, and his sense of responsibility extended beyond his own wife and child. He also shouldered the burden of providing for his uncle's family, a heavy weight for any man. This meant that no job was too small or too insignificant. He reportedly took on projects that other, more established directors would have scorned, accepting low pay and difficult conditions simply because his family needed the money. His son, Wong Jing, would later speak of his father's tough childhood and the immense burdens he carried. This was not a life of artistic leisure. It was a life of relentless work, of chasing the next paycheck to keep the wolves from the door. Every film he made, every script he wrote, was another battle in his personal war against poverty. This struggle was made infinitely more difficult by a deeply personal hardship that played out within the walls of his own home. His wife had developed a serious gambling problem, accumulating a staggering debt that hung over the family like a storm cloud. The amount was enormous for the time, a figure that could have easily ruined them. Wong Tin-Lam was forced to work even harder, driven by a desperate need to pay off these debts and keep his family afloat. The pressure must have been immense, a constant gnawing anxiety that followed him from his home to the film set each day. This private turmoil fueled his legendary work ethic, turning him into a tireless creative force who simply could not afford to slow down. While his peers might have seen a master craftsman at the height of his powers, the reality was a man running on fumes, driven by love, duty, and the ever-present fear of financial collapse. This was the crucible that forged Wong Tin-Lam, the man who would become a pillar of an industry, built on a foundation of personal hardship and an unbreakable will to provide. The world Wong Tin-Lam had masterfully navigated for over 2 decades began to crumble around him in the early 1970s. The bedrock of his career, the grand studio system that had once seemed so permanent, was fracturing. The motion picture and general investment company, the powerhouse better known as Cathay, that had backed his greatest cinematic triumphs, was in steep decline. The reliable factory of filmmaking that had provided him with steady, if often stressful, work was shutting down its assembly line. For a director so accustomed to the rhythms and resources of a major studio, this was more than a professional setback. It was an earthquake. He, along with many of his contemporaries, was suddenly a freelancer in a rapidly changing market. The old certainties were gone, and for a man whose entire career had been a fight for stability, the future looked dangerously uncertain. He could have tried to battle it out in the increasingly independent and chaotic film scene, but Wong Tin-Lam was, above all, a pragmatist. He saw a new machine being built, one that was smaller, faster, and piped directly into the living rooms of millions. He decided to adapt. His pivot to the burgeoning world of television was a move born of brilliant foresight and his signature practicality. He joined Television Broadcasts Limited, the station widely known as TVB, not as a step down, but as a strategic conquest of new territory. At the time, many in the film industry looked down on television as cinema's loud, cheap, and artistically compromised younger sibling. But Wong saw its potential. He saw a medium with an insatiable appetite for stories and a direct line to the heart of Hong Kong's culture. He brought his decades of filmmaking experience to the small screen, accepting a role as a producer, and in doing so, he didn't just join the industry. He began to revolutionize it. He became one of the key architects of Hong Kong television's golden age, a period when the quality and popularity of local productions would become the envy of Asia. He quickly proved that his storytelling instincts were as sharp as ever. As a producer at TVB, he was the creative force behind a string of massive hits that redefined what television drama could be. He oversaw the creation of epic series that became appointment viewing for the entire city. When one of his shows aired, streets would quiet down as families gathered around their television sets. His productions, like the gritty family saga, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and the iconic gambling drama, The Shell Game, were more than just entertainment. They were cultural phenomena. They were sprawling, novelistic tales filled with complex characters, shocking betrayals, and high emotional stakes. Wong infused these series with a cinematic quality, raising the bar for production values, pacing, and narrative complexity. He took the genres he had mastered in film, the crime thriller, the melodrama, the story of the underdog, and expanded them into captivating long-form narratives that held the public spellbound for weeks on end. Yet, perhaps his most enduring contribution from this era was not the shows he created, but the creators he nurtured. The TVB production offices became his new classroom, and he, the seasoned master, became a revered mentor. He cultivated a new generation of talent, young, ambitious directors, who were eager to learn but lacked the practical experience he possessed in spades. His office became a legendary training ground. Young filmmakers like Johnnie To, Ringo Lam, and Ann Hui all passed through his informal academy, learning at the feet of the veteran who had seen and done it all. His teaching style was a direct reflection of his own journey. It was tough, demanding, and entirely practical. There were no abstract lectures on artistic theory. Instead, he taught them the hard-won craft of telling a story efficiently and powerfully. He taught them how to manage a crew, how to solve problems on the fly, how to compose a shot for maximum impact, and most importantly, how to do it all on a grueling television schedule and a tight budget. He was known for his bluntness, but also for his generosity. He would give his young charges incredible responsibility, trusting them to direct episodes of his blockbuster shows, and then watch over them with a critical but supportive eye. He was building an army of filmmakers trained in his image, pragmatic, resourceful, and completely focused on the audience. He was passing down the DNA of his survivalist approach to filmmaking, equipping them with the skills they would need to eventually leave the nest of television and launch their own legendary careers in the film industry. In doing so, he was ensuring his own legacy would extend far beyond his own filmography. While the stories he produced on screen were often filled with schemes, scandals, and dramatic confrontations, his own professional life during this period of immense influence was remarkably clean. In an industry famous for its larger-than-life egos, bitter feuds, and public controversies, Wong Tin-Lam remained a figure of quiet authority and respect. He was simply too busy working, too focused on the next production, the next script, the next young director's problem to become embroiled in any personal drama. He was the calm at the center of the creative storm he had engineered, a man whose reputation was built not on headlines, but on an unparalleled record of success and an unwavering dedication to the craft. As the incredible energy of the 1980s gave way to the 1990s, the man who had been a relentless engine at the heart of Hong Kong's entertainment industry for 4 decades finally began to slow his pace. The crushing pressure of producing hit after hit, of managing massive crews and tight schedules, started to recede. Wong Tin-Lam had navigated the treacherous waters of the film industry, survived its collapse, and then conquered the world of television. He had paid his dues many times over and had finally earned a measure of peace from the constant financial anxieties that had once plagued him. But a man like him, whose entire identity was interwoven with the world of filmmaking, could never truly leave it behind. Instead, he found a new, more graceful way to remain a part of the action. He stepped out from behind the camera and into the light. His transition into character acting was the perfect final act to his storied career. It was a role he seemed born to play, and in a beautiful full-circle moment, he often found himself taking direction from the very filmmakers he had once mentored. There was a profound poetry in seeing the old master on set, patiently hitting his marks for his former protégés like Johnnie To, or even for his own son, Wong Jing. This new career wasn't a comeback, it was a victory lap. He no longer carried the weight of the entire production on his shoulders. He could simply arrive, inhabit a character, and lend his immense presence to a scene. And what a presence it was. He was often cast in roles that mirrored his real-life status as an industry patriarch. He played venerable triad godfathers, wise elder statesmen, and powerful clan leaders. He didn't need extensive dialogue. His face, etched with the experience of a long and challenging life, could convey more than a page of script. His performances were masterclasses in stillness and quiet authority. This was never more apparent than in his unforgettable role in Johnnie To's critically acclaimed 2005 crime epic, Election. As the aging triad leader, Uncle Tang, he was the film's moral and historical center. In a film filled with ambitious, violent men scheming for power, his character radiated a weary gravitas. He commanded absolute respect not through force, but through a deep, unshakable sense of tradition and wisdom. When he spoke, everyone listened. His performance was magnetic, a testament to the idea that true power is often quiet. It felt less like acting and more like he was simply being himself. A respected elder guiding a new generation, embodying the very soul of the world his mentee was putting on screen. He was no longer just Wong Tin-Lam, the director. He was now a living symbol of a bygone era, a piece of Hong Kong cinema's history made flesh and blood. His appearances in his son's more commercial films had a different flavor, a hint of a personal, familial bond, playing out for the public to see. A father supporting his son's work in the most direct way possible. In these later years, his status as a titan of the industry was solidified. He was universally acknowledged as a patriarch, a foundational figure whose influence was almost impossible to fully measure. His legacy was twofold. First, there was his own extensive body of work, a library of films and television shows that had entertained millions and defined entire eras. But his second, more profound legacy lived on in the people he had shaped. His impact was visible in the slick commercial blockbusters of his son, Wong Jing, who inherited his father's sharp commercial instincts and incredible work ethic. It was equally visible in the dark, stylishly crafted crime thrillers of Johnnie To, who had learned the fundamentals of visual storytelling under the elder Wong's tough but fair guidance. He had passed on his DNA to the next wave of Hong Kong filmmakers, ensuring that his practical, powerful, and audience-focused approach to storytelling would continue to thrive. His life story became an inspiration, a testament to adaptability and resilience. He was the man who survived the collapse of a studio system that had made him a star, the man who saw the future in television when others saw a lesser medium, and the man who gracefully transitioned to a third act as a beloved actor. He did it all without major public scandal, earning a reputation for professionalism and integrity that stood in stark contrast to the often tumultuous industry around him. He was a craftsman, not a celebrity, a man driven by the fundamental need to provide for his family, who in the process ended up building an empire. The final years of his life were quiet. The relentless motion that had defined him for over 60 years began to cease as his physical functions declined. The man who had been a constant presence on film sets and in production offices finally settled into a well-deserved rest. When he passed away in November of 2010 at the age of 83, the Hong Kong entertainment world mourned the loss of one of its founding fathers. It was the end of an era, the final closing of a door on a period of cinematic history that he had not just witnessed, but actively created. His was the story of a survivor, a mentor, and a master, a quiet giant whose footsteps had paved the way for generations to come. From the film sets of the 50s to the TV studios of the 80s and the silver screen again. As an actor in his final years, Wong Tin-Lam's journey is a blueprint for resilience. He wasn't a flashy celebrity, but a hardworking craftsman who survived industry collapse, paid off crippling debts, and mentored the next generation, all without a hint of scandal. His legacy isn't just in his own work, but in the DNA of modern Hong Kong cinema itself. What do you think was his greatest achievement? Let us know below and subscribe for more deep dives.